A Bridgerton prequel and spin-off has just been released, and it was all about Queen Charlotte, a character that we've come to know extremely well from her involvement in the Bridgerton show. However, this 6-episode season allowed us to watch her origin and love story unfold, and the lengths that one would go to for their significant other. From her arrival in Britain to her marrying King George III, his mental illness and the securing of the family line, I thought I'd check to see how accurate the show was, and if there are any main differences to what we were told. Spoiler, there's a big one about a not so happy ending, so let's get into it. Here is how accurate was Queen Charlotte a Bridgerton story. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Let's start by looking at her family and how she ended up in Britain. Within the Netflix show, we saw that she was brought over to Britain by her brother Adolphus, somebody who is actually a real historical figure just like Charlotte. King George's mother was keen for George to marry somebody so that he'd be able to secure an heir to the throne and continue the family line, something that was pretty similar to what occurred in the history books. In the history books, once George decided that he wanted to marry Princess Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, a group of escorts set off to Germany with the intention of getting the marriage agreement signed. This then led Adolphus and Charlotte to head over to Britain in order to have the marriage ceremony and wedding take place, which happened only a matter of a few hours after she arrived in Britain. Everything that I just mentioned were things that we did see occur in the Netflix show, and was what essentially opened the season up. However, one difference was that it wasn't an extremely large wedding like was depicted in the show. It was only a few guests, the royal family, and the party that had travelled back from Germany who were present there for the celebrations. In the show, we saw that Princess Augusta kept George's illnesses hidden away from Queen Charlotte, which was something that was actually true in real life as well. Augusta didn't tell Charlotte of any illness that was present, so much so that Queen Charlotte was petrified when she first saw signs of it, almost like what we saw being exhibited when she saw him outside in the show. We heard that Queen Charlotte and King George III went on to have 13 children, which is something that was also correct. However, they had 15 children in total, but only 13 of them survived long enough to see adulthood. Within the show, we also saw that Edward was the child that went on to have an heir that went on to continue the family line. And this was something that was actually true, despite it not being the direct heir that followed on directly after King George III, as George IV went on to become king. Then it continued down George III and Queen Charlotte's children. However, Edward and Victoria eventually went on to have the eventual Queen Victoria, who went on to reign for over 60 years. This is where I imagine the line that Queen Charlotte mentioned about having a strong queen was taken from, due to the inspiration. We saw in the show that Princess Charlotte of Wales was a character that died in childbirth, which led to the persistent nature of Queen Charlotte wanting her children to have an heir to the throne, which was something that was actually true. Princess Charlotte was the original heir to the throne and was George IV's only issue, and she died at the age of 21. An area where some characters and close friends within the show weren't real was the character of Lady Danbury, so everything that we saw involving that character wasn't true. Brimsley is also a character that never existed in real life. Well, I imagine there was an individual who'd most likely do what he did within the palace, and there would be somebody there to attend to the Queen, but it wasn't Brimsley. That would mean that the romance with Reynolds also didn't occur. Another character that wasn't real was Violet Bridgerton, and was created for the purpose of the TV show. Now let's take a look at King George III and his illness. Within the show, we saw that George had an ongoing battle with mental illness throughout the entirety of his life, telling us that he had terror that was within him, terror that came at the price of being a royal, and it was even present right at the end when he was elderly, when we saw that he was drawing on the wall and was still obsessed with the stars and the sky. The battle with mental illness was something that was present throughout George's reign in real life too. However, I don't believe it was something that was as prominent throughout his younger years, nor was it focused around terror and the pressure of having the weight of the nation on his shoulders. According to a modern diagnosis, when looking at the symptoms and behaviour that he exhibited, it's theorized that he could well have had bipolar disorder. However, that is only one study that was done, and there are other assumptions too. It was said that on occasions in the 1780s he came across as deranged, would be speaking in a panicked, frantic, repetitive state without stopping, and was even foaming at the mouth at some points. Within the show, we saw that he was restrained as part of his treatment, and it being said that there were humours inside of him. These were things that actually happened in real life too. However, the ice baths and other methods that we saw being utilised were things that were not documented. But who knows? You could imagine some kind of extreme treatment back then, as they were doing all sorts of things to people. Towards the end of King George's life, the death of his youngest daughter was said to trigger his mental illness again, and it reached a point where he was distraught every day. This meant that his son, King George IV, took over as regent until he died. By the end of George's life, he was blind, deaf, and had dementia. And what makes this even sadder and paints a tragic end to the love story that we were shown on screen was that George didn't even know that his wife, Queen Charlotte, had died. However, this led me to look into the love story a little more, and it's sad to say that it's not quite as it seemed on screen. King George and Charlotte's love. Whilst the pair were in love and were together for the entirety of their life, the lifelong love and togetherness that was present in the show was something that wasn't actually true in real life. 6 years before Queen Charlotte died, it was said that she stopped visiting him due to being fearful of being around him as his condition got worse. And even 15 years before she died, she slept in a separate room and ate her meals completely separate from him too, because she didn't want to see him on her own. However, there was a sense of compassion and love towards him still, as despite not spending much time with him for the final 15 years, she was said to be extremely supportive of him. So there was still a sense of love there, just not the fairy tale romance that we saw blossoming and unfolding within the show. I think the most heartbreaking thing of it all was the fact that he didn't even know that Queen Charlotte had died. But by then, it wasn't due to the episodes that he was having, it was due to having dementia and losing 2 main senses. Other truths. There were a few other truths that I stumbled across that were from the show that popped up when researching. We saw in the show that Queen Charlotte enjoyed going to musicals. This was something that was also true in real life. Buckingham House, Windsor Castle, and Kew Palace were the 3 main places that we saw being present in the show, and they were the actual residencies that they owned during their time together. As you can see, there were a lot of similarities that were present in the show that were taken from the history books, but there was also a lot that was exaggerated for the purpose of entertainment, which was something that was mentioned before the show started. I think they balanced fact and fiction well and ultimately created a show that allowed a love story that was beautifully crafted to be created. It was definitely the best installment of Bridgerton, less scandal and more focus on historical facts and the development of characters. I just hope the next one is just like that. So, there you have it, the accuracy of Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. If you want to see more videos such as endings explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @BrainPilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this show? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.